Saruman the White was secretly working against the West. This was the penultimate White Council meeting, and he was only willing to attack Sauron in Dol Guldur once he found orcs roaming the Gladden Fields, meaning that the enemy had learned of Isildur's fate. He of course was looking for the ring for his own means to dominate and rule Middle-earth. Hey, how's it going? This is Gone with Gandalf, reminding you to wash your hands till they look like golems. Today I am of course chatting about Saruman the White and why he was not allowed to come back to life, just like our boy Gandalf the Grey was able to return as the White. The mission of the wizards or the Istari was to aid the men, elves and dwarves against the rising threat of Sauron, but they could only do this from the sidelines and were told, you five are Maiar and are the Valar's ambassadors, go do your job but don't show off, we are watching you. They were supposed to be like the old mentor on the shoulder of the young prodigy who would then find their own way. They couldn't raise their own army to counter Sauron's, but should their allies do that of their own volition, then that's fine and dandy, and they can get involved somewhat as long as they aren't the ones in charge. Saruman initially would have had this goal, but he was a bit of a bookworm and would read a lot about the accounts concerning the perceived powers of the One Ring and Sauron, and would come to fancy a bit of that pie for himself. In the films this seems like it happened fairly quickly, but it was more of a long-winded thing, and this is ultimately why Saruman would end up being exiled. In the Hobbit films they tie in the continuation of his character arc in The Lord of the Rings, when Saruman says that he will deal with the retreat, or the retreating Sauron, and this gives a foreshadowing glance for the cameras. It's like 1% short of what, if he just directly looked into the camera, winked with a 2-second delay. So if we look at the attack on Dol Guldur, this was proposed by Gandalf the Grey, but as the senior figure in the Order of the Wizards, Saruman put it off and delayed it for 91 years. He knew that the One Ring was lost in the Anduin close to Dol Guldur, and hoped that proximity to its master would lure the ring out of hiding, and he only agreed when he thought that Sauron was getting too close to finding the One Ring for himself, as his servants reported that orcs were scouring the banks of the river as well. Of course we know this wasn't too bad of a plan, since the ring did come out of hiding by escaping Gollum in this very same year, although something happened which the ring did not intend, as Bilbo Baggins would be the one to pick it up. So he is no longer playing by the rules that were given, and even though the rest of the wise of Middle-earth weren't aware of this until later, Saruman's boss in Valinor and the King of Arda, the big honcho, the greatest of the Valar, Manwë, was sitting on his throne on the highest peak of the mountain Dani-Quetal, and he was able to see all, and he was jotting all these things down on his clipboard ready for the disciplinary meeting. I actually have I think it was my first video that goes over all of the Valar, so if you're interested, you know where to go. Now, after Sauron openly declared himself in Mordor about 10 years after this, the White Council would have had their final meeting, where Saruman would lie and say something along the lines of, "Oh yeah, I've been looking for the ring in the Gladden Fields for a while, I haven't found it, so it's 100% found its way into the sea, and we won't be seeing it again." And then he went back to Isengard and started fortifying it without telling anyone, and started building his army, and he sent spies to the Shire because he thought Gandalf was up to something. This was about 60 years or so before the War of the Ring. And then as we get on to the War of the Ring, I'll condense the war with Rohan by saying that Saruman would feign an alliance of the two towers between himself in Orthanc and Sauron in Barad-dûr, and say that by building the army of Uruk's half-orcs and Enlending men with the aim of destroying and subjugating the nearby kingdom. This is a blatant disregard again for those rules, and that was set for all of the wizards in their, job description. So this is like almost the final nail in the coffin. But despite all of this, Gandalf the White, who had always been a defender of the West and was an example of true altruism, gave Saruman the chance for redemption after his army's defeat at Helm's Deep. This was his last chance, as he would then be stripped of all of his powers when he said no, essentially. He was stripped of all of his powers, and Gandalf broke his staff. This was a very big deal because this took away all his privilege that came with being a wizard, an Istar, and indeed a Maya. In the films, this is where Saruman gets stabbed in the back by Grima Wormtongue, but I'll continue through until the book ending, since it paints a picture of his doom that you don't see in the film, although I obviously do like the film. I'm not trying to knock it, but on towards that fate we go. After the destruction of the ring and all the pageantry of weddings and coronations, Gandalf the White and the hobbits, along with an entourage of elves, would commence their journey home. Just prior to this, Saruman, who had lost his powers, he still had his voice, and it was very commanding, and people seemed to be very obedient when he spoke to him in it. So he managed to make his way past the Ents anyway, and he trudged his way out of Isengard and started his journey towards the Shire. Yes, the same Shire as to where the hobbits are from. There is only one. The returning party actually pass Saruman on the road as they snake their way back to Rivendell, but after reaching Bree, the four hobbits of Frodo, Sam, Merry and Pippin are on their own as Gandalf goes to find Tom Bombadil to pull him for a chat by the fire. If you get that reference, then comment. Saruman had pulled his last act of treachery here in spiteful defeat and had invaded the Shire with a band of men and taken Bag End as his base because he thought, that he would have gotten away with it too had it not been for those meddlesome hobbits. He was defeated by the Hobbit rebellion led by the returning four and was killed by his henchman Grima Wormtongue after Saruman pinned the blame on him, and he snapped he'd had enough, and he slit his throat, and his spirit, his being Saruman's spirit, rose from his corpse, looked to the west before a gust of wind came from the west and blew him away. So as a Maya, just like elves, they can be rehoused in a new body in Aman in the west, but as he had his powers stripped and all the privilege, this was akin to him being fired from his job and disowned all in one. So the wind from the west was the Valar rejecting him and punishing him for his treachery by damning him to wander Middle-earth as a spirit forever. Had he been like the good boy Gandalf the Grey, then of course, he would have been rehoused, but and also the fight against Sauron in the Third Age would have been potentially far easier, but that is a what-if story, potentially for another video. If you like that kind of thing, then let me know. But thanks for watching. Subscribe if you absolutely adored this content, and like and comment if you absolutely hated it. But I'm going with Gandalf now. Good day.